Hello, my name is Jacob Monk. Welcome to a little video about the subject, what is it to be Danish? And I'm talking about to be real Dane, not a fake Dane, not a German agent, not a CIA agent from USA, not a NATO steward, but a real Dane. What is a real Dane? Well, let's see. When we go back in time, the first religion we had in Denmark was real Christianity. It came to Denmark year 965. Harald Bluetueth, you know, the Bluetooth gadgets you have in your pocket, they are named after Harald Bluetueth, Harald Blåtand in Danish. This was an old king living in the 9th century, and he was the one who introduced Christianity to Denmark. And I'm talking about Catholic Christianity, real Christianity. He put up the Jellingestenen, the Jellingestenen, and this stone there he printed, me, Harald Bluetooth, I introduced Christianity to Denmark. And this kind of Christianity, it continued up until 1536, that is for 571 years, and even more, because of course we had Christianity in Denmark also before Harald Blåtand. There was a Catholic monk called Popo, maybe 100 years before Harald Blåtand, and he was the one who first brought Christianity, real Christianity, to Denmark. So let's say we have had real Christianity in Denmark for 671 years. After that, we had the coup d'etat, an invasion from Germany, and this invasion, it introduced a quite new religion called Protestantism. This is a modern word. In the old days it was called Lutheranism, because this religion was invented by a German former monk called Martin Luther. Martin Luther, he was a fallen monk. He was mentally sick and he ended his life by hanging himself. But before he made an end of his own life, he made a lot of awful things. The biggest war in European history is called the 30 Years' War, from 1618 until 1648, and this was because of Martin Luther. The division of Germany in many small states, and these states fighting against each other for hundreds of years, this was the result of Martin Luther. Protestantism, and today we have 40 or 50,000 different Protestant sects all over the world. All kind of Protestantism is based on Martin Luther. Most Protestants, they don't agree about much, but they agree that we are not Catholics. Well, let's go back to the old Danish culture. Danes, before we became Christian, we were Vikings. Some people looking at my videos, they believe that the Vikings were peaceful people. Not at all. The Vikings were even worse than the American imperialists are today. They tried to conquer even USA. Yeah, they went to USA by boat. But there were so few that they couldn't take up the fight against the native people of USA. Therefore, they went back to Greenland and to Iceland, where they had some colonies. The Vikings, they conquered most of Britain, a big part of France, big part of Germany, a part of Italy, many parts of what is today called Eastern Europe and Russia, and actually you can find quite a few Danish names in the Russian towns even today, Danish names coming from the Viking heritage. Well, some of the Vikings, they came to Denmark from Russia, and other Vikings, they went from Denmark to Russia. So there was some kind of cultural and religious exchange. But the Vikings, they were very bad people. They were not Christians. And wherever they came, they raped, they conquered the monasteries, they killed the men and enslaved the women and the children. So they were even worse than ISIS, the infamous Islamic sect that has been ruling in some parts of Middle East until recently. Well, the Vikings, I'm very glad to say that their career, they ended when we had decent Danish kings to rule around the Danish territory. Well, Harald Bluetueth was a decent Danish king, and he ruled until some other kings took over power, and from there is a line of Danish kings going up until today. This line is not unbroken. No, we've had to change the ancestry a few times. But the idea that Denmark should be ruled by a king, not by a democracy, it's a very old idea that still is in use today. Well, so let me reject the myth of the nice Vikings. The Vikings were awful people trying to conquer, to rape, to destroy other cultures, and their wealth, they got it from stealing and plundering foreign countries and foreign cities. Well, now we have 1219. 1219, the Danish Christian king, he went to Lyndaise in Estonia, and there he had a big battle against the heathens of that time. There was some kind of Byzantine Vikings. And there, during the battle, the flag of Denmark, this flag here, it fell down from the heaven. There was, among the warriors, there was also a Catholic bishop. And every time this Catholic bishop held up the Danish flag, well, this is a later invention that this should be the Danish flag, but every time he took up this sign, this iconic sign, well, the Danes had success in the battle. And in the end, we won the battle, and Estonia was actually Christianized after that. But this flag here, well, according to mythology, it fell down from heaven. But in reality, it was taken from a German fighter, because the German order, it is a big Catholic order. It still exists today, but in the 13th centuries it was an order of warriors trying to Christianize, first of all to fight to get Jerusalem back for the Christians, and second to fight to Christianize Eastern Europe. And these Christian warriors, they had this as a sign outside on their they had defending armaments and everything, and outside they have this sign so they could show each other that they belong to the German order. And one of these signs, it fell down on the ground, and a Danish soldier picked it up, and after that it has been considered to be the lucky sign of Denmark, and today it is considered to be the Danish flag. So remember, Denmark is an old Catholic nation. We have been Catholics for 671 years. After the so-called Reformation, that is the time where Ramstein in a cooperation with the Danish king Christian III. They invaded Denmark. They killed the Catholic armies first in Jutland. They beheaded the leaders of the Catholic called Skipper Clement. After that, they went to the center of Denmark, Fyn, and had another battle there. They also won because the German soldiers, they were professionals. The Danish Catholic soldiers, they were just amateurs. They were peasants. They didn't have any training. They didn't have any real weapons. So they couldn't fight against a professional German army. After that, our main city, Copenhagen, was besieged for around 6 months, and there was absolutely nothing to eat in Copenhagen. And this video here, it's made from Copenhagen. Right now, I am in Copenhagen. And in Copenhagen, they started to starve. And after this starvation had been going on for some time, they had to give up and open the doors in the city walls and letting the German invaders get in. And after Rantzau and his soldiers, in cooperation with the Danish traitor king Christian III, they came into Copenhagen. First thing they did was to catch all the Catholic bishops. We had 8 Catholic bishops in Denmark. A few of them were located in Copenhagen. The main bishop was called Joachim Rønnow. He tried to flee away and hide, but they found him. They put him in Bluetueth, a very nasty prison part of Copenhagen castle, and there he died a few years later. And after that, the Christian religion was forbidden in Denmark. If you were a Catholic monk or priest, you would have death sentence. And even in Norway, you didn't have to be a Catholic priest. You could just be a normal peasant. If you sang a hymn about Virgin Mary, you would be burned at the stake. That happened several times in Norway. That was a part of Denmark these times. Well, the Protestant Reformation was not a reformation. It was an invasion coming from outside. And after that, actually, Denmark was some kind of colony of Germany. And that is one side of our culture. Even today, somebody say that we are a Germanic tribe. Well, that can't be right. For many years, up until 100 years ago, in Denmark, we spoke German language. Danish is only, I would say, a dialect within the German language. So Denmark was Protestantized. We were put under the spell of the German Lutherans, just like the northern part of Germany were Lutherans. After the ending of the 30 Years' War, there was a peace deal, and this part of this peace deal was that every ruler, every king could decide himself what kind of religion they should have in the area where he was ruling. And the same happened for Denmark. So since then, we have been Protestant, but we have never been democratic. No. In the Danish constitution, you'll read nothing about democracy. Today, Denmark is run, it is a monarchy run by a king. In our constitution, it is written that the king has to be a Lutheran. Today, it's a queen. She has to be a Lutheran. She can't choose her own religion. And she is the political background of everything. Of course, we have a parliament because the queen can't decide everything in details. But the parliament has absolutely no power in Denmark unless the queen signs the decisions they have made. So Denmark is a monarchy, that is very clear. You can read our constitution. But after this short lesson about Danish history, let's go to the modern Denmark. As I told you, Denmark is a Lutheran country because of the invasion 1536, because of this is what Protestants called a civil war. But the so-called Reformation was nothing like a civil war in Denmark. It was a plain invasion of a German general called Ramstein and his professional soldiers that had three big battles and one long siege of the main city, Copenhagen. This was the way they conquered Denmark and forced us to be Lutherans and in the Catholic religion. That is what happened. Well, after that, Denmark was some kind of German colony. During Second World War, Denmark was considered best friend with Adolf Hitler. And before that, we were considered best friend with Napoleon in France. The Danish foreign policy has always been to associate with the strongest power out in the world. And today America is the strongest power, so Denmark is associated with USA. We are part of NATO. You could see Denmark today as actually an American colony. But also we were a former German colony. So a lot of the theology in Denmark, it is German Protestant theology. A lot of the language in Denmark, the traditions, the philosophy, the ideas, our understanding of human beings, our psychology, it came from Germany. Basically, Denmark is a part of Germany when it comes to culture. But Germany, after the Second World War, they were occupied by the Americans. Still today, America has a lot of huge military bases in Germany, and Germany is not allowed to make their own political decisions. They are run from USA. And the same goes for Denmark. Denmark is an Americanized country. When you see the television, you will find that nearly all programs are made in England or USA. Hollywood culture, you can call it. Yeah. And this Hollywood culture has a lot of bad things. This is not a specially Lutheran culture, no. Americans, they are Protestant, but they are not specific Lutherans. There are so many Protestant sects, The modern American culture is a pro-gay culture. So therefore, Denmark is one of the countries where sexual liberalism, also called hedonism, is among the proposed views of life of many young Danes. Therefore, in Danish television, you will see advertisement for homophilia and lesbianism, all kind of sexual perversions. Every year we have demonstrations supported by the state, by government money, for being homosexual. So Luther, he went against the Christian marriage. Luther, he said, you can't be married in a legal way. God don't care about who you're living with. So Christian marriage, as we had before the Reformation, it was abolished. And since 1536, Danes has not been able to marry a legal way. A Danish marriage is only the same as a sexual contract. It's a contract that we can live together and have sex until we split apart. And if we have children together, it has some consequences when we divorce, because most Danes, after they've been married, they divorce afterwards. That's why we have so many single men and women in Denmark, and so many children without a father. That is very, very common in Denmark because of the gay culture, the Lutheran culture that was introduced in 1536. But today, of course, it is much worse than in 1536 because Luther, he was an enemy of any kind of minority. He said that every Jew, every Catholic, they should be killed, they should be hanged. Peasants making any kind of protest against the German kings should be killed. And if Luther had knew anything about homosexuality, I'm quite sure he would have said that homosexuals should be killed too, because that is what is written in the Bible. And he was a follower of the Bible. That is what he said. Today, the Danish culture is first consist of Germanism, 2 of Lutheranism, 3 of homosexual culture, 4 of nationalism. That is very important, that nationalism was the consequence of the so-called Reformation. Every nation, including Denmark, wants to rule itself and they don't want to interfere with other nations. Therefore, Denmark has had more than 20 wars with Sweden, with Britain, with Germany. It is because of nationalism. Nationalism is the idea that I'm one up compared to you. I'm better. My nation is better than your nation. My political system is better than your. My religion is better than your. My culture is better than you. Me as a person, I'm better than you. And so on and so forth. It is some kind of racist way of thinking. The word racist, it's a modern word, but it covers some of the same that was called nationalism in 100 years back from now. So nationalism is a very well spread point of view in Denmark. Actually, it's the point of view that most Danish politicians support. And last but not least, I will tell you about authoritarianism. Martin Luther had the idea that every kind of uprising should be kept down and the people making uprising should be killed. That is what he told the German peasants rising against the rulers of the Germany after the Reformation. Well, authoritarianism in Denmark means that the state is taking more than 50% of what is produced. Every time I earn 1,000 kroner, that is around maybe $200, the state will take at least 50%, that is $100. And they'll keep this money for running the television. You know, it's the state, the politicians who decide what is in television in Denmark. We don't have the legal right to make our own television channels unless the politicians, they can censor the channels and control that it is what is sent out in these channels. It is in fully accordance with the Danish Lutheran American worldview. Well, today Denmark is member of an alliance called NATO, and Danish politicians say, well, USA is our friend because they are members of NATO too. Therefore, everything coming from USA is good. You are not allowed to criticize USA, and you're not allowed to criticize the friends of USA, first and foremost Israel. Therefore, when you go to Copenhagen today, you will find out 24/7 hours there is police and military outside all Jewish institutions. first and foremost the Jewish synagogue in Krystalgade in the center of Copenhagen. It is the most militarized street in Copenhagen because of the Jewish synagogue. Well, in no churches in Denmark there are police outside, and no mosques there are police outside, only in front of the Jewish synagogue. And the reason they give is that years back one Jew was killed in front of the synagogue. So now we are coming to an end, and first of all, what is it to be Danish? To be Danish is to be a Catholic, because Denmark is an old Christian Catholic country. This is a Catholic sign. It's certainly not a Lutheran sign. This is a cross, and this is symbolizing the blood of Christ. Well, after Reformation, the Lutherans decided that there is no transformation during the when you go to church, when you go to Mass, the bread and the wine won't transform into the body and blood of Jesus Christ. No. This is only symbolic. It is not happening in reality. So the Lutherans, they got rid of the Catholic theology. And they also got rid of the Catholic morals, because Luther had the idea that you don't have a free will. And everything you do is evil, evil, evil. Human beings are evil. And this is the reason that Denmark is one of the most state-controlled and militarized states in Europe. Comparing to our small size, the number of soldiers and the police force is huge. Denmark is an authoritarian state. It is a monarchy, not a democracy, and it is filled of German and American culture. Well, I think I mentioned the roots of Danish culture and also the way that Protestantism developed from the 16th century until today, where Protestantism has diversified in Americanism, homophile culture, racism, authoritarianism, and militarism. Thank you for listening.